Greetings, and thank you for taking time out of your day to show your interest in the topic of IBC and NFPA, building construction types and classifications. Before I get started, I just want to take a quick moment and give a quick disclaimer. This video content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. I myself as the author do not make any representation, applicability, fitness, completeness of the video content. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit educational or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use. What I'm going to be actually covering over the next several minutes is an overview of the building construction types and how it relates to the firefighting response tactics and strategies. Special emphasis is going to be placed on my local jurisdiction down here in Concord as it applies to our personnel. So IBC and NFPA recognize 5 basic building types, with type 1 being fire resistive and being the most stringent protection. These consist of non-combustible exterior and structural components, also being non-combustible and are actually protected and carry fire protection ratings. You're going to see these in heavy industrial sites. They're generally either tilt slab construction and reinforced concrete structures, but you may also see I-beam with sprayed on protective coatings as well. Second type is non-combustible as well, similar to type 1, but offers a reduced rating, in that these are where you're going to see more of your lighter industrial applications, warehouses, school buildings, churches, same basic materials, but again, just a lot less stringent areas where you're not going to have the critical life safety concerns that you would on a heavy industry or a hospital type setting. Type 3 is old style construction, basically late 19th century, non-combustible exteriors that are basically highlighted, but may also, the structural supports are typically combustible material instead. So instead of having steel supports, you're going to have wood or flammable materials, as you see here. Type 5, heavy timber, also called mill construction, which is going to be very interesting for our folks down here in Concord. Also non-combustible exterior, but heavy timbers making up the structural supports inside. That was to handle the heavier loads that went with manufacturing back in those days. And then type 5 is something we're pretty much all familiar with. These are your typical residential and light commercial balloon frame construction and platform frame construction, which we're going to talk about here in a few minutes. Delving in a little bit deeper, you have your type 1, your fire resistive construction. Again, these are non-combustible exteriors and non-combustible support structures internally. Again, as I said earlier, we see now a lot of concrete, cement block, steel reinforced concrete is the most popular methods. Structural components inside, encased steel reinforced concrete for floors and ceilings, or you may also see again that sprayed on protective coatings as well. You're going to see these mostly in areas where life safety is critical. So in our case, the new Concord Hospital up the road. Also you'll see it in, the other one is our favorite big box store here in town, but you'll also see it in other places such as those large transportation warehousing facilities, the Amazons, the Walmarts, and some of the others that you see around as well. Some of the biggest concerns for us as responders in a hospital, you're not going to run into too much. Again, there's not much of a fire load in those environments, life safety being the key factor in those. But in the others, these large warehouses, we do need to concern about what's in them. So it's not so much the structure itself, it's the fire loads that are in them. If you have a heavy enough fire load and it catches, you have to wonder, is it rack storage? Is it something, are the buildings sprinklers? Is there fire protection systems in place? Do they have a fire brigade to knock out the small incipient fires? This is the kind of stuff that we will need to know as responders. That's something we need to work very closely with our Fire Protection Bureau, as well as performing our own tours and pre-planning, so we know what's in these buildings. Additionally, we also need to be aware of, again, where they're located, where you keep all their hazardous materials. Reason being is you get a high enough, strong enough fire in these rooms, in these buildings, you can have buckling of the support structures, you can have cave-in, so just things we need to be aware of. Type 2 are also non-combustible, as I said earlier. These are a little bit lighter in weight. You're gonna see these things everywhere. As far as a commercial facility goes, this is probably gonna be the most typical one you're gonna see out there. These are steel framed with steel skeletons holding them up. Unlike the class 1s that are gonna be heavily reinforced, protected, these are not. Generally, they're exposed materials and they're gonna be a lighter weight material as well. Basically, they're just metal skins. Office, institutional, educational use, churches, school buildings, offices, light industry. Again, this is where we need to know from responders what is actually in these buildings. Are they living up to what they're supposed to be? Do they keep a heavy fire load in here? Do they keep hazardous materials in these buildings? So again, working closely with the Fire Protection Bureau, as well as doing our own tours and pre-plans for these structures. Type 3. This is what's deemed as ordinary construction. These were very popular in the late 19th century, and being an old historic district such as we have here, we have a lot of them as well. Probably the most popular one is the Barbara-Scotta College that is still up there, that was built in the late 1800s. These again, older construction, concrete, bricks in this place, but again, we also have structural supports are generally timbers. They're going to be lightweight timbers. It's all wood structure inside. What makes these things kind of dangerous for us and be aware of is the way that these things are put together. As you can see here, if you look on the outside, actually both of these buildings have these little white sections there, and here you have these finials that stick out. These are not just for aesthetics. Those actually have purpose in that those are support plates that go through the wall and into the timbered frames inside. They can either be threaded rod or they can even be cable, but their main purpose is to secure the timbers to the concrete or the masonry walls and hold them in place. Generally, what you have in these buildings is corbels, which is also basically a ledge. Again, what you have here is you have the timbers. In this case, it's exposed, but you have the timbers coming in, and they're actually resting on a ledge on that masonry wall. Those cables or those bolts will be coming through from the outside into these structures. Now, for our safety and security, what do we need to know? Well, first off, we don't know the condition of these things. We need to be able to know that they're there. The other main problem with these is, in this case it's exposed, but in the case it wasn't, you have corridors where fire can easily travel through and build up and actually have fire pop out behind you before you're even aware of it. Type 3, ordinary construction continued. Now again, I said this was late 19th century when it was popular. They were phased out. They're actually making a big comeback now, in that you now have ordinary construction. A lot of them are occurring in these 2- and 3-story condo developments. And what they actually have now, again, you have building industry out there, and you actually have fire-rated lumber. These are actually simulated with pressure treat for weather. They actually have a fire protection rating on them as well. How that's going to work in the long term, we don't know, but it is out there, it is approved, and it's just going to be a wait and see. But again, on the outside, you have non-combustible exterior, again, using these rated materials over lath or even vinyl siding at this point, and then your combustible interiors as well. So they hold up for now, but it's all just going to be a wait and see. Type 4, heavy timber. So again, this is, given our area where we're located, these are also called mill construction. Go figure. We actually have a lot of these down here. These could be retrofit or even new construction. They are making heavy timber in a lot of the new designs. A lot of the modern designs use heavy timber as well as the glass steel, just to kind of pull all the different materials together. In this case, what you had is non-combustible exterior and structural support of combustible material, just like the Type 3 ordinary. So again, there's these heavy duty buildings. The only difference is the weight of the material, heavy timber instead of the lighter material. Again, these were heavy industrial sites. In our cases, it was all textile mills. And what we have now is the retrofit. People coming in, these buildings have a lot of character, so they're rehabbing them and turning them into new facilities. What we have here in Concord at the Gibson Mill is a multiple use facility where you have offices. We have all in one location. You have offices, you have restaurants, you have coffee shops, you have 2 microbreweries in here, all located on the first floor. Now, when it comes to retrofit, what we need to be careful of, and again, know what we're dealing with, we need to work with our Fire Prevention Bureau, the subcode officials, to know what these are. If you look at these, the first floor is fully occupied. Floors 2 and 3 are sitting empty. It looks like there is materials up there, but what is it? Is it just storage? You don't know. These buildings are not typically sprinklered. Since they're retrofit, they don't necessarily need to be. And also you have to wonder is what other changes have been made structurally. So from a firefighter's response, you still have these potential voids. You still have degradation. These buildings are over 100, 150 years old. Wood tends to rot over the years. So you have weakened areas. You may also have other areas that have undermined the building's structural capabilities from all these renovations. So we need to be aware of these things. Taking a step back on this one as well, you guys may know this one as well. Another one of the old textile mills, the old Cannon facility up there. In this case, it's abandoned. You have a lot of dead loads sitting up there. You have water towers, you have other components sitting in a building that's over 150 years old. And like we pointed out to before, this building also has, you can look at the outside and you can see the structural members that are holding those wood beam floors up. And again, you don't know the condition. One added note on this one is you can see the fire department has already marked this one caution no interior attack, which means there is known structural instabilities inside these buildings. So again, know what you're playing with, pre-plan it. The last thing you want to do is show up at 1 o'clock in the morning to fight a fire and not know what's going on in these buildings. Type 5 is, again, these are ones we're pretty much all familiar with, wood frame construction. Balloon construction was popular up until about the early 1950s. They were started to phase out. There was no mandate. They just started to shift away from them. Balloon construction, basically all that means is you had your studs that went from the basement all the way up to the attic. So all your vertical supports were in line with one another. Now, what was bad about this, what they've learned over the years, is you have a basement fire, something happens in the basement or even on the first floor, and by the time that first engine company arrives, you already have fire venting out through the attic, because each one of those vertical studs gives a void and creates a natural chimney to the upstairs and to the outside. That is an area where you have hidden fire, and they had a lot of losses. So what actually came out of it then is they came up with a modern day platform construction, which is what you see now in all the newer buildings. In these cases, what you have is they build a subfloor, you put your joists up to the top of the first floor, you build a second subfloor, and you go up again. That not only saves on material, you don't need wood as long in the length that you would with balloon frame, but it also relieves that problem. You actually now have a fire break. You basically have compartmentalization between your floors, slows fires down. The other problem you have, that you do have with these new buildings though, these new houses, is you have the lightweight construction, you have the lightweight I-beams that are out there, and also a lot of these too, you have a lot of dead spaces. Everything is architecturally, aesthetically pleasing, but it also creates for a lot of voids in the walls, a lot of large open areas where fire can propagate and again catch you from behind if you're not paying attention. So I hope you found this class useful, and I appreciate your feedback. Thanks, and have a great day.